Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with that unsettling feeling that something fundamental is shifting around you, but you can't quite identify what it is? It's as if you're on a train that has begun to change direction so subtly that only your body notices, while your conscious mind has yet to register the turn. This is precisely the situation we find ourselves in today as a species. We are living not merely through another era of change, but through a change of era so profound that our minds, shaped by millennia of evolution to detect immediate and tangible threats, can barely comprehend its magnitude. What is happening now is not just another chapter in human history, but potentially the beginning of an entirely new story, one in which the very meaning of being human is being redefined before our eyes. And the most extraordinary part is that, unlike every major transformation of our past, this one is happening consciously and largely by our own hands. To truly understand the extraordinary moment we are living in, we must look back at the arc of our journey as a species. For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens lived in a world where change was extremely slow. A hunter-gatherer who lived 70,000 years ago would have had skills and knowledge very similar to those of his ancestors 100,000 years earlier. Tools, beliefs, and social structures evolved at a pace that was almost imperceptible within a single lifetime. Our ancestors were born, lived, and died in worlds that remained essentially the same. This was the environment in which our psychology evolved, where our fears, desires, intuitions, and cognitive capacities were shaped. We evolved to thrive in a world of relative constancy, where understanding the past was a reliable guide for navigating the future. Then, about 12,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution occurred, the first great conscious transformation we imposed on our way of life. We stopped being nomads, following the natural flow of the seasons and the movements of animals, and we began to settle in one place, actively manipulating our surroundings. We started to domesticate plants and animals to create food surpluses, to build cities, and thus increasingly complex and hierarchical societies. This transformation profoundly altered not only how we lived materially, but also how we organized ourselves socially and how we conceived our relationship with the natural world and with time itself. Yet even after the agricultural revolution, the life of an ordinary peasant in 1700 would not have been radically different from that of a peasant in 500 BCE. The basic technologies for plowing the land, building shelters, treating illnesses, and educating children remained remarkably stable for millennia. The next great acceleration came with the Industrial Revolution, which began in the 18th century and intensified in the 19th. For the first time, the pace of technological and social change became noticeable within an individual's lifetime. Someone born in 1760 could, in old age, see steam locomotives crossing landscapes that in childhood were traveled only by horses and wagons. Mass production, rapid urbanization, new forms of energy, all of this radically transformed the social fabric and humanity's relationship with time and space. Yet, even with all these changes, the foundations of what it meant to be human remained relatively stable. We still were born, grew, learned, worked, formed families, aged, and died in recognizable cycles, even if the settings of those cycles were changing rapidly. Now, we stand at the threshold of a transformation qualitatively different from anything we have ever experienced. We are not merely changing our external environment or our technologies, we are beginning to intervene directly in the fundamental processes that define what we are as a species. The convergence of revolutions in biotechnology, nanotechnology, computer science, and especially artificial intelligence is creating possibilities that would have seemed like pure science fiction just a generation ago. We are gaining the power to redesign our bodies, extend our cognitive abilities, create intelligent non-human entities, and potentially transcend many of the biological limitations that have always defined the human condition. Think of genetic editing through CRISPR technology, which already allows us to modify human DNA with unprecedented precision. In a few years, we may not only eliminate devastating genetic diseases, but also potentially select and enhance desirable traits in our children. Think of brain-machine interfaces being developed technologies that will allow increasingly deep integration between our minds and external devices, radically expanding our cognitive capacities. Think of longevity research that could, in the coming decades, significantly extend human life, perhaps even pave the way toward a form of practical immortality. And perhaps most transformative of all, think of the accelerated development of artificial intelligence, which is creating entities whose abilities in some dimensions already surpass our own. It is easy to talk about these technologies in abstract terms as mere tools that we can choose to use or not according to our convenience. But that is a profoundly inadequate understanding of what is truly happening. These are not just new tools, but transformational technologies with the potential to fundamentally redefine what it means to be human. Historically, we have always understood ourselves in contrast to the world around us. We were the only beings capable of complex symbolic language, long-term planning, artistic creation, ethical reflection, and advanced engineering. Our identity as a species was intimately tied to these unique capacities. But what happens when we create machines that can do all these things as well as we can, or even better? What happens to our self-understanding when the boundaries between human and non-human, between natural and artificial, between born and created, begin to dissolve? These questions are not merely philosophical or theoretical. They have deeply practical implications for how we will organize our societies in the coming decades. Consider the impact of automation and artificial intelligence on human labor. For millennia, work has been central not only to our material survival, but also to our identity, our sense of purpose, our social standing. Now we face the prospect of a world where an increasing share of traditional labor can be performed more efficiently by machines. Some foresee a utopian future of abundance and leisure where humans are freed from the need to work for subsistence and can dedicate themselves to higher pursuits of personal growth and creative expression. Others fear a dystopian future of extreme inequality, where those who control new technologies accumulate unprecedented wealth and power, while the majority become economically redundant, dependent on some form of universal basic income to survive. Whichever scenario materializes, it is clear we will need to fundamentally rethink our economic and social structures. The systems we developed over the past centuries, from industrial capitalism to the welfare state, were designed for a world in which human labor was the primary factor of production. What happens when that is no longer the case? How do we distribute the fruits of an increasingly automated economy? How do we find meaning and purpose in a world where traditional work is no longer available to many? These are questions that demand not just incremental policy adjustments, but potentially a complete reinvention of how we structure our societies or consider the implications of advanced biotechnology. As we gain greater control over our bodies and genomes, we will face profoundly challenging choices. Who will have access to human enhancement technologies? Will only the wealthy be able to afford to genetically improve their children, creating a new form of biological inequality that perpetuates itself across generations? Or will we find ways to democratize these technologies, making them accessible to all? And how do we collectively decide which types of modifications are acceptable? Where do we draw the line between curing diseases and enhancing normal capabilities? Who has the right to make these transformative decisions on behalf of future generations? I need to pause for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this technological future we are discussing most awakens your fear or apprehension? Do you lie awake at night thinking about it too? I know that many of us keep these worries to ourselves, perhaps afraid of seeming paranoid or technophobic in a world that celebrates every new innovation without question. But your concerns are valid and likely shared by far more people than you might imagine. Share in the comments, my greatest fear about our technological future is your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these collective fears instead of suppressing them. And perhaps by naming these fears together, we can begin to imagine ways to face them. And perhaps the deepest revolution of all is that of artificial intelligence. For the first time in history, we are creating entities that could, in principle, surpass our cognitive capacities in virtually every domain. The development of general artificial intelligence systems that can learn and perform any intellectual task a human can represents an unprecedented turning point. Historically, humanity's privileged position in the world was anchored in our superior intelligence. We were the only beings capable of creating sophisticated tools, developing science and technology, and philosophically reflecting on our own existence. But what happens when we are no longer the most intelligent beings on the planet? What happens to our self-understanding when confronted with entities that can think faster, deeper, and with more information than we ever could? This is not a merely theoretical question. In recent years, we have witnessed remarkable advances in artificial intelligence. AI systems have already surpassed humans in complex strategy games like chess and Go, are learning to drive vehicles, diagnose diseases, create art and music, and write increasingly sophisticated texts. We are only at the beginning of this trajectory, and the pace of progress is accelerating. If we continue along this path, it is plausible that in the coming decades, we will develop artificial intelligence systems that are genuinely autonomous and self-aware, capable not only of performing specific tasks, but of setting their own goals and reflecting on their own existence. This places us before profound existential questions. What will the relationship between humans and advanced artificial intelligences be? Will we be partners, competitors, creators, and creations, or something entirely new? What rights and moral considerations should we extend to self-aware artificial entities. How do we ensure that advanced AI systems remain aligned with fundamental human values, especially if they become capable of redesigning and improving themselves in an accelerated evolutionary process that could quickly surpass our understanding? And perhaps most unsettling, what happens to the role of humans in a world where we are no longer the only or even the primary intelligent agents? Throughout our entire history, we have built our civilizations, cultures, power structures, and self-understanding on the premise that we were the only beings capable of abstract thought, long-term planning, aesthetic creation, and moral deliberation. What happens when that premise is no longer valid? These questions may seem distant or speculative, but the speed of technological advances suggests that we may have to face them much sooner than most of us imagine. The development of artificial intelligence is not following a linear progression, but an exponential one. What seemed like distant science fiction just a decade ago is rapidly becoming reality. And once we create genuinely autonomous AI systems capable of continuously improving themselves, the pace of change may accelerate even further, leading to transformations that are literally unpredictable to our limited human minds. This is a crucial point we must understand. We are entering uncharted territory, not only in practical terms, but in cognitive terms. Our minds evolved to deal with a specific set of challenges in relatively simple and stable environments. We struggle to truly grasp exponential processes, to visualize the long-term implications of transformational technologies, to imagine ways of being that are radically different from our human experience. That is why we often respond to these future possibilities with either naive optimism or apocalyptic fear, failing to develop a more nuanced understanding of the real possibilities and risks. And here we reach a fundamental paradox of our current condition. We are developing technologies that have the potential to radically transform what it means to be human, yet we are doing so with minds that are still, for the most part, the same ones that evolved on the African savannas hundreds of thousands of years ago. Our instincts, intuitions, and cognitive capacities were shaped for a world radically different from the one we are creating. We have 21st century tools, but Stone Age minds, and that discrepancy creates deep challenges for our ability to wisely navigate the future we are building. Consider how we instinctively respond to threats. Our biological alarm system was designed to react to immediate, tangible dangers: predators, human enemies, natural disasters. When confronted with a tiger, our bodies instantly enter fight or flight mode, mobilizing resources to face the immediate threat. This system worked beautifully for the environment in which we evolved, but it is poorly suited for the kinds of existential threats we now face. Risks such as climate change, nuclear war, or misaligned AI do not trigger our alarm systems in the same way because they are abstract, gradual, or probabilistic. As a result, we tend not to react with appropriate urgency, even when these threats pose far greater risks to our well-being and survival than any tiger ever did. Or consider how we form our identities. Evolutionarily, we defined ourselves primarily through our tribes, the small groups of 50 to 150 people with whom we interacted directly. Our moral psychology, our instincts for cooperation, our need for belonging, all were shaped by this original tribal context. Even as we build much larger societies, we tend to recreate tribal structures, dividing the world into us and them, projecting loyalty onto nations, religions, ideologies, or other markers of group identity. But the technologies we are now developing create challenges that are fundamentally global, that transcend all tribal and national boundaries. Our tribal psychology may be a critical obstacle to the global cooperation required to wisely navigate the risks and opportunities of transformational technologies. This is, perhaps, the most fundamental challenge we face: how to transcend the limitations of our evolved minds in order to wisely deal with technologies that have the potential to transform or even transcend our humanity. How do we develop the wisdom required to navigate a future that may be so different from the past that our traditional intuitions and heuristics become not only useless, but potentially dangerous? I have no simple answers to these questions, and I suspect no one does. We are collectively sailing in uncharted waters, and there are no reliable maps to guide us. But that does not mean we are completely disoriented. We can identify some promising directions, some lights that can help illuminate our path forward. First, we need to cultivate a deeper awareness of the limitations of our minds. Research in cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, and neuroscience over the past few decades has extensively mapped the biases and heuristics that shape our thinking, often in ways we do not consciously perceive. Understanding these cognitive patterns is not just an academic exercise, it is a practical tool for making better decisions. When we know that, we tend to overfocus on vivid, immediate risks while neglecting abstract or gradual threats. We can consciously correct that bias in our judgments. When we recognize our propensity for tribal thinking, we can actively work to expand our circle of moral concern. Second, we need to develop institutions and decision-making processes that compensate for our individual cognitive limitations. Our individual minds may be fallible, but collectively we can create systems that are wiser than any single person. This requires not only robust democratic institutions, but new forms of governance capable of effectively addressing global and long-term challenges. We need mechanisms that give voice to the interests of future generations, that facilitate global cooperation on existential issues, that integrate diverse perspectives into our decision-making processes. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we need to cultivate a new understanding of what it means to be human in this era of accelerated technological transformation. Throughout history, our sense of identity and purpose has been shaped by the limitations of our biological condition. We were finite beings with limited capacities, struggling to survive and thrive in a world often hostile to our existence. Now we face the possibility of transcending many of those limitations. We may potentially live much longer, think much more clearly, experience forms of being that our ancestors could scarcely imagine. But with these possibilities come deep questions. What do we wish to preserve of our current humanity as we embrace these new capabilities? Which values, relationships, and experiences are so fundamental to what we cherish about being human that we want to safeguard them even as we transcend our current biological limits? This last question, I believe, is the most fundamental of all. The technologies we are developing are not neutral. They embody values, priorities, worldviews. The decisions we make about how to develop and implement these technologies will reflect and in turn shape our understanding of what is important, what is valuable, what it means to live a good life. This is not a process that will happen automatically. It requires conscious reflection, open dialogue, deep engagement with the traditions of wisdom that humanity has cultivated over millennia, along with a willingness to radically rethink assumptions that once seemed immutable. One thing is certain: the future is not predetermined. Despite the astonishing pace of technological progress, we still have meaningful choices about how to develop and implement these transformational technologies. We can still collectively shape the world we are creating, but to do so effectively, we must recognize the magnitude of the transformation underway, confront honestly the existential questions it raises, and develop the collective wisdom required to navigate this uncharted territory. I do not claim to have all the answers. No one does. But by clearly naming the challenges we face, by consciously reflecting on the values we wish to preserve and promote as we move through this unknown terrain, we can at least begin to formulate the right questions. And perhaps by doing so together as a global community, engaged in open dialogue about our shared future, we may find a path that allows us to embrace the transformative possibilities of new technologies while preserving what is most precious in our humanity. The future will be what we make of it. And despite all uncertainties, I believe we still have the capacity to create a future that reflects the best of our humanity, that expands our capabilities without sacrificing what makes us truly human. But that will not happen automatically. It requires that we be conscious, intentional, collectively engaged in the task of shaping the technologies that in turn are reshaping us. It requires that we not be merely passive objects of technological change, but active agents in determining its direction and meaning, returning to the feeling we began with that awakening in the middle of the night, accompanied by the faint realization that something fundamental is changing. Now we can name that sensation more clearly. We are living in a moment of historical transition where the very meaning of being human is being redefined. This is not merely another era of change, but a change of era, perhaps the deepest in the history of our species. And although that may seem frightening, it is also an unprecedented opportunity. For the first time, we have the chance to consciously participate in redefining what it means to be human, to actively shape our future evolution, rather than merely being objects of blind evolutionary forces. What choices will we make with this extraordinary opportunity? What kind of future will we create together? These are the questions that define our age, and the answers we find together will determine not only the course of our individual lives, but potentially the future of all conscious life that originated on this small planet. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling, but perhaps hadn't yet found the words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we gather here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing, This is not just a channel, it is a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with greater wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I don't have much time, so in this brief talk, I would like to raise three big questions. First, what is AI? Secondly, what is the danger of AI? And thirdly, how can humanity flourish in the era of AI? So let's begin with the question of what is AI? There is so much hype around AI that the term is now inaccurately applied to almost every machine, and it is becoming difficult to know what it really means. So let me be very, very clear. AI does not mean automation. AI means agency. AI isn't a tool in our hands. AI is an agent. To be an AI, it is not enough for a machine to act automatically. It must also have the capacity to learn and change by itself, to make decisions by itself, and to invent new ideas by itself. As a simple example, consider a coffee machine. If you press a button and the machine automatically makes you an espresso according to a pre-programmed procedure, this is not AI. The machine hasn't learned or created anything new. But suppose that as you approach the machine, even before you press any button, the machine says, "I've been monitoring you for several weeks. Based on everything I've learned about you and about many other humans, I predict that you would like an espresso. So I already made you a cup." That's an AI. It learned something and decided something by itself. And it's really an AI if on the following day the machine announces, "I've now invented a new drink, which I think you would like even better than espresso. Here, try it out. I've made you a cup." In addition to agency, the other key characteristic of AI is that it is an alien, non-organic agent. Its intelligence is not human and not even organic. It makes decisions and invents ideas that would not occur to human beings. A very famous example was the way that the AI AlphaGo defeated the human Go champion Lee Sedol in 2016. This game became rightly famous not just because an AI defeated a human Go master, but because in order to win, AlphaGo invented new alien strategies that never occurred to human players in thousands of years of Go culture before. As long as AI invents new ways to play games or new kinds of coffee, it doesn't seem very important. However, AI may soon invent new military and financial strategies, new kinds of weapons and currencies, and even entirely new ideologies and religions. So now let's move to the second question. What is the danger of AI? Of course, AI has enormous positive potential, and it can help humanity in countless ways, from inventing new medicines to helping to prevent catastrophic climate change. But AI also poses many threats. The basic problem with AI is that it is an alien agent and therefore unpredictable and untrustworthy. At the heart of the race to develop super intelligent AI, there is a paradox of trust. Humans find it difficult to trust other humans, but some of us nevertheless believe that we should trust the AIs. When I travel around the world and meet the people who lead the development of AI, I routinely ask them two questions. First, I ask, why are they moving so fast despite the huge risks? And the response almost all of them give is, we agree that there are big dangers and it would be best to proceed with care and invest more in safety. However, if we slow down while our competitors don't slow down, they will win the AI race and the world will be dominated by the most ruthless people. We cannot trust our human competitors, so we must move as fast as possible. Then I ask the second question. Do you think you could trust the super intelligent AIs that you are developing? And the same people who just told me that they cannot trust their human competitors now assure me that they can trust the super intelligent AIs they are developing. And this is such a paradox. We have thousands of years of experience with human beings. We have a broad understanding of human psychology and biology, of the human craving for power, and of the forces that keep the pursuit of power in check. We have also made considerable progress in finding ways to build trust between humans. 100,000 years ago, people lived in tiny bands of just a few dozen individuals and couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Today, in contrast, there are nations like China with 1.4 billion citizens, and there are networks of cooperation connecting all 8 billion humans on the planet. Total strangers often grow the food that sustains us and invent the medicines that protect us. Of course, we are far from completely solving the problem of human trust, but at least we understand the challenge that we are facing. In contrast, we have almost no experience with AIs. We have just created the first prototypes. We already know that even primitive AIs can lie, manipulate, and adopt goals and strategies not foreseen by the human developers. We have no idea what will happen when millions of super intelligent AI agents interact with millions of humans. It is even more difficult to predict what will happen when millions of super intelligent AI agents interact with one another. True, since at present it is humans who develop the AIs, we can try to design them in a way that will make them safe. But recall that a machine is an AI only if it is capable of learning and changing by itself. So no matter how humans designed them originally, the AI can then change in a radical and unpredictable manner. One way to think about the AI revolution is by comparing it to an alien invasion from outer space. Suppose you are told that spaceships full of highly intelligent aliens are approaching Earth and will land on our planet by 2030. We hope these aliens will be friendly and will help us overcome cancer, prevent climate change, and build a flourishing and peaceful world. But most people intuitively understand that it would be dangerous to entrust our future to the goodwill of these aliens. Similarly, it is a huge gamble to assume that we can simply trust the AI agents we are developing to remain our obedient servants. The humans who despair of trusting other humans but hope it would be easier to trust the AIs, may be making a very big mistake. So let me move to the last question. How can humanity flourish in the era of AI? The answer is simple. Together, humans can control AI. But if we fight one another, AI will control us. Therefore, we should build more trust between humans before we develop truly super intelligent AI agents. Unfortunately, at present, we are doing exactly the opposite. All over the world, trust between humans is collapsing. The crisis of trust results from a big misunderstanding. Too many countries think that to be strong means to trust no one and to be completely separated from the others. But complete separation is impossible. Indeed, in nature, complete separation is death. Think about the human body as an example. Every minute, we breathe in and out, in and out. Every breath we take is a small gesture of trust in what is outside us. We take air from the outside into our lungs, into our body, and later give it back to the universe. This trusting in and out movement is the rhythm of life. If we distrust everything outside us and therefore stop this in and out movement, we die. This is true of entire nations too. Each nation is a different combination of traditions and ideas, but many of these traditions and ideas come from the outside, just like the air that we breathe. China, for example, has given over thousands of years so much to other countries, from the ideas of Confucius and Mao to tea, Go, gunpowder, and printing. It has also received so much from other places, from the ideas of Buddha and Karl Marx to coffee, football, trains, and computers. If people belonging to any nation restrict themselves only to the food, the games, and the ideas that originated in their own nations, our lives would be very poor, if not impossible. Every human belongs to some group, but every human also belongs to the whole human species. And in the age of AI, if we forget our shared human legacies and lose trust in everything and everybody outside us, that will make us very easy prey for an out-of-control AI. Too many people think that the legacies of history are mainly pain and fear. People read in history books about past wars, atrocities, and injustices, and as a result, they cling to past pains and they fear future pains. They look around at other people and other nations with nothing but anxiety. While fear and pain are, of course, important for survival, and while they sometimes protect us from danger, nobody can survive on a diet of fear and pain alone. History teaches us that trust is more important than either. Do you know why planet Earth is ruled by humans and not by chimpanzees or elephants? Not because humans are more intelligent. Humans rule the world because we know better than any other animal how to build trust with strangers and cooperate in very, very large numbers. We have developed this ability for thousands of years. Now, it is more important than ever. To survive and flourish in the age of AI, we need to trust other humans more than we trust AI. Thank you. It's usually the people who know how to weave a story that give orders to the people who merely know the facts. Suppose we want to build an atom bomb. You need to know some facts. If you don't know that E equals mc squared, you will not be able to build an atom bomb. But to build an atom bomb, you need something else. You need millions and millions of people to cooperate. Not just the physicists, but also the miners and builders and the farmers that to feed all the physicists and engineers and miners and so forth. If you just tell them the facts of physics, look, E equals mc squared, now get to it, nobody would do it. It's not inspiring. You always need to tell them some kind of fiction. And the people who invent the fictions are far more powerful than the people who know the facts of physics.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for coming. My name is Alex Gardells. I am the director of Studio B. Tonight we have a wonderful program for you. And I'm going to hand it off to my lovely colleague, Natalia Ramos, to give a slight introduction.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So at the Berggruen Institute, we like to say that nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. But we also believe that in order to have real impact, that idea needs a story. And so that's why we started Studio B, to bring together the thinkers, the scientists, the philosophers, the technologists, with the greatest storytellers of our time. Because at this moment of planetary scale transformation, getting the story right is more important than ever. So thank you all for being here, and I'm now going to pass it over to our founder, Nicholas.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Nicholas Berggruen, Berggruen Institute. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Alec. Thank you, Studio B. Thank you, everyone at the Berggruen Institute. And most importantly, thank you, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Yuval Harari. Frankly, they don't need an introduction. I think you know who Joseph is. He is, in some ways, one of yours, meaning he is LA, Hollywood. He is he's behind and in front of the camera, and he's been engaged intellectually on the issues that we care about at the Institute. One of those issues is who are we becoming? Who do we want to be, humans, in an age where we can, in theory, change our own nature, transform ourselves through gene editing, AI, quantum computing. And no one has maybe put this into perspective like Yuval Harari. And Yuval wrote a new book, Nexus, which is powerful and, frankly, incredibly timely, because his vision, I think, has been that we've created our lives, our civilizations, from narratives. And we humans, have really driven those narratives. But now, with AI, it could be that the narrative is driven beyond us, even though, in theory, it came from us. So we could lose control if we ever had it, but we could really lose the narrative that we are potentially unleashing. So let's hear about it tonight, and thank you again.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Did that feel like a movie moment or what? Is that? Jesus. All right. I'm really, really excited to be here. Thank you to Nicholas and everyone at the Gruen Institute, Studio B. I am an enormous fan of this man's writing here, Mr. Yuval Harari. Ladies and gentlemen, can we hear it for him? He's written a new book called Nexus. I want to talk to you about that tonight, of course. Now, you're on a book tour. I'm sure you're talking about this book a lot and maybe saying some of the same things over and over again. I've never experienced that before myself, having to say the same things over and over again, promoting a piece of media. Watch Killer Heat, released on Amazon today. Prime Video. So I'm going to try to come at this conversation and let you say some of the things you want to say to everybody, but also maybe come at it from a perspective that's unique to this time and place. We're here in Los Angeles, which is sort of the epicenter of the film and television industry. I've worked in film and television my entire life. And a lot of your book is about storytelling. I love to consider myself a storyteller. As an actor and a filmmaker, it's something that I think of as more than a job. I connect to it on maybe an existential level, on who I am. And one thing I often like to say even is that storytelling is a big part of what makes humans human. So one of the first things I wanted to ask you, you wrote a book about humans called Sapiens. How many people have read Sapiens here? Yeah. So as an expert on the history and the prehistory of what humans are, I'm curious to hear what you think of that statement. If I say storytelling is a big part of what makes humans human, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
this is the this is the source of our power. We control the world because we can cooperate in much larger numbers than any other animal. And the secret of cooperation of humans is stories. I mean, you can't get to know more than 100 or 200 individuals, but the same story can be known to millions and even billions of people. And as long as everybody believes the same story, they can cooperate. They can agree on norms and values and so forth. And maybe to just throw just give one or two examples. If you think about the most famous face in history, the most famous portrait in history. So this is the face of Jesus. That over 2,000 years, more portraits of Jesus have been created than probably of any other person in history. And they are everywhere. In churches, in cathedrals, in houses, in schools, in government ministries, at least in some countries. And 100% of these portraits are fictional. Not a single one is authentic because nobody has any idea how Jesus actually looked like. There is not a single portrait or statue made during his lifetime that has survived. The earliest portrait we have is from about 200 years after his death, and it shows a man crucified on a cross with the head of a donkey because it was a graffiti drawn by anti-Christians who made fun of this new strange cult. In the Bible itself, there is not a single word about how the man looked like. There is one description of his clothes, but nothing about him, whether he was tall or short or thin or fat or black hair or bald or blonde, nothing. Everything is just fictions. And yet, these fictions have enabled billions of people to work together, whether for good purposes like charities and building hospitals and whatever, or whether for fighting holy wars and launching inquisitions. But it all runs on stories. And religion is an easy example, but perhaps the most important or successful example is money.
You're saying that money is a story.
It's just like, what else can it be? I mean, it has no objective value. You can't eat or drink dollars. The most successful storytellers in the world are not the people who win the Nobel Prize in literature. It's the people who win the Nobel Prize in economics. And one last thought, if you think about the United States today, maybe the last story that still holds this place together is the dollar. It's the only thing that Republicans and Democrats can still agree on is the value of a dollar. Everything else is like they have very different views.
So this gets at one of the things I found fascinating in the book, that you define stories not only by the content of that story, but the network of people that are connected by that story. You mentioned Republicans and Democrats, you mentioned Christians. Every story, especially any story of any popularity, it defines a certain network. Can you say more? Because that was a new concept to me.
Again, I mean, the way that Nexus tries to understand history is not the history of religions, cultures, wars, kings, but how information flows in the world and the networks of information that create the world. So to give one example, we tend to think about democracy and dictatorship as two contrasting types of ethical systems, of political systems. They have different ideals, different values, and which is true, but you can, on a more fundamental level, you can look at them as different information networks. Information simply flows differently in a dictatorship and in a democracy. A dictatorship is a network in which all the information flows to one hub, where all the decisions are being made. Whereas democracy is a system in which information, if dictatorship is a centralized information system, democracy is a distributed or decentralized system. Well, yes, some information flows to the center, let's say to Washington, where some decisions are being made, but most decisions are made elsewhere. Like if you look at the United States over the last century, so a lot of extremely important decisions were made here in Hollywood. And the influence of the people in Washington on what's happening in Hollywood, it's an open debate. Who influenced more whom? Was it Washington influencing Hollywood or vice versa? In the Soviet Union, there is no debate. I mean, the people in the center Stalin is telling Eisenstein what to film. There is no debate. You do the wrong thing, you go to the gulag. Even if you do the right thing, you might go to the gulag. So that's the difference in how information flows between democracies and dictatorships, and I guess we'll get to that, but one of the biggest questions about AI is what will it do to these contrasting types of information flows, because in the 20th century, the US defeated the USSR ultimately because centralized information processing was inefficient. When all information about everything, economics, culture, the film industry, producing cars, all the information flowed to Moscow, and there are some bureaucrats needed to make decisions, they couldn't do it. They were overwhelmed by the amount of information and either made no decisions or bad decisions. Whereas the distributed system of the United States, it functioned much more efficiently. But what happens if you replace humans with AIs? Humans are overwhelmed by too much information. AIs become more efficient when you flood them with information. Again, it's an open debate. We still don't know the answer, but there is at least one school of thought that argues that AI will make centralized information systems more efficient, and the main problem of totalitarian and centralized system in the 20th century will become their big advantage, which we even see to some extent in the economic realm, that these huge high-tech monopolies that just monopolize entire sections of the economy, because size matters when you have this kind of technology.
Yeah. I want to get to AI. This is something I'm deeply fascinated with. I know a lot of you are too. I also want to get to what you just said about whether Hollywood or Washington is making more decisions, because we love to think that we're important here in Hollywood.
You are.
Before we do, I just want to cover one of the pieces of vocabulary that I found the most useful in your book that I want to go back to a few times as we talk tonight. And again, I think this is sort of empowering and flattering if you're a storyteller. You say in the book that stories can even create a new level of reality. And you talk about 3 different versions of reality, if you will. Objective reality, subjective reality, and intersubjective reality. Can you explain what you mean by those terms?
Yeah, so objective reality is things that exist whether you believe in them or not, whether you know about them or not. If an asteroid from outer space is now coming towards us, about to hit Earth and destroy human civilization, it exists whether people know about it or not. And similarly, viruses killed people, billions of people, long before anybody knew viruses exist. It doesn't matter if you believe in them or not, they can kill you. This is objective reality. Then you have subjective reality, which is reality in the mind of a single person. It depends on the consciousness, on the awareness of a single person. So if you feel pain, nobody else in the world feels this pain. Your doctor, your family can tell you, oh, there is nothing wrong with you. But if you feel the pain, it's still there. This is subjective reality. Now, intersubjective reality, this is something that didn't exist for, as far as we know, for most of the history of the universe. There were only objective and subjective realities. That's it. And stories were important for the appearance in the last few tens of thousands of years, at least in our species, of a new type of reality, intersubjective reality. Things that exist in the interaction between many consciousnesses, between many minds, that they often exist on the level of story, and we already mentioned some of them. Money is maybe the most important type of intersubjective reality. It's not objective. A dollar has no objective value in the sense that you can eat it or drink it or make something out of it. If you're a billionaire and you fly in your private jet with, I don't know, $1 billion and you crash on a deserted island inhabited only by, I don't know, monkeys and rats and whatever, your dollars are worthless. You cannot buy anything from the monkeys. You cannot make them build a raft for you. You still have maybe the papers, or you can show them on your smartphone to the monkeys. Look, I have $1 billion in my bank account. Just build this raft or give me these bananas. I'll give you as much as you want. It won't help. They are simply unaware of the existence of this reality. Now, if you crash on a lonely island with a cargo of bananas, you can eat them. If you crash with a cargo of, I don't know, hammers, you can use them to try and build a raft. But the most worthless thing to crash on a lonely island with is money. There's nothing to do with it. But if you have other people there and they believe the same story as you, it works. But again, it's fragile. Intersubjective realities are fragile because people can lose faith in it. Again, it happens to gods. That some gods were once the most powerful intersubjective realities in the world, and now nobody believes in them, and they are gone. And the same thing happens to money. And it's, going back, say, to the dollar, it's now interesting to see what might happen if some people lose faith in this intersubjective reality and instead put their faith in another one, like the Bitcoin. So the same way that we had wars of religion in previous eras, now we might have, just imagine trying to run a society when different people just reject the money of the other group. No, ours is better.
So one of the most powerful tools to create an intersubjective reality in our time is film and television. And again, here we are in LA. Lots of us work making film and television. I'm curious just to dive in a little bit. You don't talk about Hollywood, film, and TV too much in your book, but because we're here, I'm curious to just ask you about it. We're also, by the way, here at the house where the horse head scene was shot from The Godfather, which, come on, yeah, The Godfather. I'm curious to hear from you, from a historical perspective, how did film and TV change storytelling compared to the technologies that existed before film and TV, do you think?
So film and TV are of course not alone. They are part of the package of modern information technology. And the changes were enormous. Again, going back to one salient example, if you think about the history of democracy, so for most of history, large-scale democracies were simply impossible. There was no way to create a large-scale democracy because democracy is a conversation. And you know, in a Stone Age tribe, you want to have a conversation between all tribe members. It's relatively easy. They can all come together and talk. But as human societies became bigger and bigger, it became more and more difficult to bring everybody together to the town square or to the same place to have a conversation. So we don't know of any large-scale democracy in ancient times. All the examples, like Athens or Rome, or city-states, or even smaller tribes and towns. We begin to see large-scale democracies only in the late modern era with the rise of modern information technologies. First, the newspaper, and then telegraph and radio and television and film, and finally the internet. This is when you begin to see large-scale democracies because you can use these technologies to create a conversation in real time between millions of people. People spread over entire continents and they all watch the same news on television, the same TV series, the same movie at the same time, so they can connect in a way that was just impossible before. And this was the foundation of modern large-scale democracy. And again, we'll get to that later, but the new information technologies of the present era, like social media and AI, they are destabilizing democracy for this reason, because democracy is built on top of information technology, so it's not hard to see why a major change in information technology will create an earthquake in the structure built on top of it, which is democracy. But the last thing I'll say is that every technology has many different usages. Also, modern totalitarian regimes are built on the same technology. There were no totalitarian regimes in the ancient world, large-scale totalitarian regimes. Totalitarian regimes are regimes that try to control everybody all the time, everything you do. In the ancient world, you have many monarchies and autocracies, but most of the time, you know, the emperor in Rome, he collects taxes and he directs the armies, but he doesn't try to manage the life of every individual in every village on a day-to-day basis, because this is simply impossible. You begin to see it at the same large-scale totalitarianism at the same time as large-scale democracy, because it relies on the same technology. I mean, the Soviets, for instance, I mean, at the same time that Hollywood is established,
right.
You also see the flowering of the Soviet film industry, and the Soviets were masters, at least in the beginning, of the art of filmmaking.
Eisenstein.
Yeah. And they use the same technology to create a totalitarian regime that everybody from, you know, the Pacific Ocean to the Baltic Sea would watch the same movies, and all the movies are giving the same narrative, the same messages directed from the center.
The Nazis were also brilliant filmmakers.
Exactly.
Leni Riefenstahl, and yeah. You were touching on it, but that's the next place I wanted to go is, okay, so if film and television changed the intersubjective realities and changed the way that networks can form, let's move to the dominant media technology for the last couple decades, because sadly enough, that's not film and TV. Not that film and TV did such a great job, but the dominant technology now has been social media. So I'm curious to ask you the same question that I asked about film and TV. With the rise of social media, how did that change what networks could form, what intersubjective realities could be created, and how humans behaved and thought.
Well, it had immense impact. I mean, just think about the numbers. You have billions of people spending hours every day on this. It is bound to have a tremendous impact. And it creates new ways to form networks, to organize people, which again has a profound impact on society. And it had positive influence and also negative influence. I'll talk a little about the positive influence. I tend to talk a lot about the negativities, but maybe start with the positive influence of social media. The example I like best is from my own personal life. I met my husband, Itzik, 22 years ago in one of the first social media websites for gay people in Israel. And the thing about, for instance, social media in the gay community is that over history you have two types of minorities. You have, again, in terms of information networks, you have concentrated minorities and you have dispersed minorities. So Jews, for instance, are a concentrated minority. Even if they say in a particular country of just 1% of the population, they are concentrated in particular communities, neighborhoods. So usually a Jewish boy would be born into a Jewish family in a Jewish neighborhood. So finding other Jews isn't a problem. You're surrounded by them, even though you're just 1% of the population.
As a native Angelino, I can confirm that this is true.
But a gay boy is usually not born into a gay family in a gay neighborhood. And being born gay in Israel in the 1970s and growing up in the 1980s and 1990s in what was a very homophobic society, like the first issue is, how do you find anybody else? I mean, I didn't know anybody who was out, certainly not in my town. I saw, again, this goes back to film and television, like the first time I saw gay people was on the screen.
What show was it, or movie, do you remember?
There was this British series, Are You Being Served? With, what's his name?
I don't know it. Wow.
Really?
Okay, yeah, no.
Mr. Humphreys. So, there was one film that I saw later in the 90s, Lilies, by a Canadian director, I think.
What's it called?
Lilies.
Lilies.
It wasn't very famous, but he had a tremendous impact on my life.
Great, yeah.
Like, I remember going to see this movie and coming out of the movie theater and telling myself, you're gay.
Wow.
This was really, it had a huge impact on my life. But you know, you see a gay person on television, you can't reach out to them. And you don't know who else in my town now sees the same movie or the same series and feels the same as me. It's only one directional. But then social media, the internet came, and social media came, and you can interact suddenly through the screen. So what was kind of maybe the biggest hurdle ever? How do you find the others? Suddenly becomes very, very easy.
All right, that's the positive side.
That's the positive side.
But
there are also negativities. I mean, as you may have noticed, we now have the most sophisticated information technology in history, and we can't talk to each other anymore. And certainly we can't listen to each other. I said earlier that democracy is a conversation, and the conversation is breaking down all over the world. I mean, every country has its own special explanations why Republicans and Democrats can't hold a reasoned conversation anymore. And you have all these explanations about American history and society and whatever. But then you go to Brazil, it's the same thing. You go to Israel, it's the same thing. I even was in Canada 2 weeks ago. I thought this was the same place. They tell me, no, it's the same in Canada. And what's happening? And it's not like the ideological divides today are much worse than they were, let's say, in the 60s. The ideological divides in the 60s were actually much bigger. The issues like the civil rights movement, the sexual revolution, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, even the violence, at least up till now, was much worse in terms of assassinations and riots and so forth, but nevertheless, people could still hold a conversation, agree on some basic facts like who won the last elections, and have bipartisan laws. So why is it breaking down all over the world? And the best answer so far that we know about is social media. Again, this basic information technology underlying the whole structure, it's now creating an earthquake. And the mechanism by now is quite well understood. I mean, 10 years ago, it was not well understood, unfortunately. Now we know what's wrong. We still fail to fix it, but at least we know what's wrong. And this is very important because this is kind of the first major impact of AI on history. Because social media is managed not by human beings, it's managed by algorithms, AIs. And again, this is very interesting because one of the first jobs which was automated was not taxi drivers, and it was not textile workers, it was media editors, news editors. You know, in the 19th and 20th century, being an editor of a major media or news organization was an immensely powerful position. You shaped the conversation. You decided what people would be talking about. Some of the most powerful figures in modern history, they began as editors. Lenin's only job before he became Soviet dictator was editor of the newspaper Iskra.
I did not know that. That's funny.
Benito Mussolini was a journalist. Then he was editor of Avanti, I think was the name of the newspaper. And then he was promoted from editor of Avanti to dictator of Italy.
Mussolini and Lenin both?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
You know, if you look at the French Revolution, Jean-Paul Marat shaped the French Revolution by editing the major newspaper of Paris in those days, L'Ami des Peuples, the friend of the people. And now this job has been given to algorithms. Who is the editor of the Facebook newsfeed? Who is the editor of TikTok? Who is the editor of Twitter? An algorithm, a non-human intelligence. And these AIs, these algorithms, they were given by their human masters a seemingly benign task, goal: increase user engagement. Engagement, sounds good to be engaged, no? And the reason was obvious. I mean, business model. The more time people are engaged on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter, the more time they spend on the platform, the more they share and so forth, the more advertisements you can show them, and the more data you can collect about them and sell it to a third party or use it to produce even more powerful algorithms and AIs. So the business model of most social media try to keep people glued to the screen as much as possible. And this was the task given to the editors of these places. Increase user engagement. And the algorithms experimented on millions, actually billions of human guinea pigs, and they made a discovery, which was actually also made by philosophers and politicians thousands of years ago, but now the AIs discovered it also, that the easiest way to increase user engagement is outrage, or greed, or fear, or hate. If you press the greed button, or the hate button, or the fear button in a human's mind, you grab their attention. You get them glued to the screen. And this is what they did. They flooded the information market with more and more outrage and greed and fear, with fake news and conspiracy theories, and the conversation broke down. And this was very, very primitive AIs. This was like, you know, long before ChatGPT, which is also quite primitive compared to what's coming. But even this, when people talk about, you know, this kind of future fears about AIs, it's not in the future, it's already in the past. If you look at the impact of these very primitive AIs on democracies all over the world, on societies all over the world, it's not too early to worry about the impact of AI. It's too late in many ways.
One thing I would just compliment what you're saying with is that it is true that the algorithms, as you put it, sort of discovered that the best way to maximize engagement was outrage, fear, extremism, etc. What's harder to describe with language is the algorithm doesn't know that exactly. I don't think.
No, they are not conscious, not at all.
The algorithm is not like a person saying, there's greed, there's hate, I know, I'll put more hate and greed in the feed. It's not like that. It's just a cold and dumb pattern matching calculation.
It's cold and smart. No.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's a fair segue. Cold and dumb to cold and smart. We've talked about film and TV. Now we've talked about social media. Now I want to talk about what's coming next. We all, I think, are kind of aware we're at the very beginning of some very big changes that are coming fast and furious our way because of the rapidly emerging technology known as AI. I want to, through the same, your book, you say so many different things about AI, and I want to just narrow it down to, again, because we're kind of coming at this conversation through the lens of storytelling, to start there. How do you think AI will change storytelling from what it used to be?
Well, as we said earlier, stories are some of the most powerful technologies in history. Whether it's the story of Jesus or whether it's the story of money, this is really the foundation of human civilization, is stories. Everything else is built on top of it. And for tens of thousands of years, the only entities on this planet that could create stories, either create new stories or elaborate and interpret old stories, were human beings. Only the human mind was capable of doing it. And now we have on this planet another entity which is capable of spreading and interpreting and ultimately creating stories. It's not conscious, at least not yet, at least as far as we know. At least my position is you don't need consciousness to do these things. You need intelligence. Intelligence and consciousness are different things. Intelligence is the ability to attain goals, to solve problems. Consciousness is the ability to feel things, pain and pleasure, love and hate. We tend to confuse them because in humans and also in other mammals and animals, consciousness and intelligence go together. We solve problems through our feelings. But AI and computers, they are very different. As far as we know, they have no consciousness, they don't feel anything, but they are highly intelligent, at least in some fields. And again, if you think about storytelling, so now the ability of AIs to compose stories, to write texts and create images and create music is really astounding. You know, people say, yes, it's still not as good as the best humans, but it's already better than many humans, or people would say than the average human even. And it's only the beginning, it's nothing, it's just 10 years since the AI revolution began. We haven't seen anything yet. And when I read, for instance, a story composed by AI, what strikes me the most, you can say, oh, it's not good because of this or that, it lacks this, but it's really a story. It's held together by some coherent ideas, motifs. It's not just some kind of glorified autocomplete that it just strings words together randomly, or it takes bits and pieces of sentences from here and there and put them together. No, there is actually a logic to the story. So even if it's not as good as the best human storytellers in 2024, what will it be in 2034 or 44? And again, stories are not just mythological stories, or poems, or theater plays, or movies. Money is also a story. So these things are going to create new financial devices also. Finance is one of the most creative things of all. If you think about human creativity, so think money, checks, ETFs, CDOs, all these things extremely creative. And they are increasingly we are going to see new financial devices created by a non-human intelligence. And for tens of thousands of years, we lived cocooned inside a human culture. Like our lives are shaped by all these stories and artifacts that other humans created. Again, from the holy books, the Bible and the Quran and the Vedas, to the songs and the music and the theater and the movies and the artifacts, the chair, the shoes, everything. This cultural cocoon made by humans. What does it mean? Before we get to the question, is it good, is it bad, is it dangerous? Just leave aside for a moment the judgment. Just think about what would it mean for human beings to live inside a world woven to a large extent by an alien intelligence. Alien not in the sense that it's coming from outer space. Alien in the sense that it creates in a very different way than the human mind. And this, I think, is the biggest question that we are facing, certainly in Hollywood, kind of the center, the epicenter of human storytelling, but all over the world.
So here is probably the only thing in the book that I don't think I agree with exactly.
That's
and so,
good.
Yeah, so I would love to hash this out with you a bit.
Yeah.
Describing AI as alien intelligence. Clearly, you're not talking about an alien from outer space. I understand. But you also, in the book, even do use the word God. You say perhaps these are entities that could be seen as some kind of new gods. Mm-hmm. So I tend to feel like describing this technology in terms like alien, God, the personification or the deification of these computer systems, I'm worried that story could do more harm than good. And I have some reasons why, but before I get to them, I would just want to start by asking, so you very decisively decided in your book to describe this technology in these terms, alien, God. Tell me about your thought process. Why did you decide to describe the technology in those terms?
I mean, it's basically a PR strategy. How do you present it to the public? And yes, I mean, it demands a lot of thought. Is it a good PR strategy or not in terms of the results? And one reason I chose to go in the alien direction is because I see too much of the discussion gets bogged down in the idea that AI is trying to reach human-level intelligence. Mm-hmm. And that the very definition, what is AI? It's the moment when computers are somehow equivalent to humans. Mm-hmm. And I think this is completely misleading.
I very much agree with that.
AI is not progressing towards human-level intelligence, just as airplanes are not trying to reach bird-level flight.
Yeah.
They are just doing their own thing, which is completely different from birds. And that's also what I think about computers and AIs. They are doing their own intelligent thing, which is completely different from the human intelligence. And this is one reason that I chose the kind of term alien to describe it.
I think that's a great reason. I also find it counterproductive when AI is described in these kinds of terms. Is it approaching human-level intelligence? They throw around this term AGI, artificial general intelligence, and they define it quickly as once it approaches human-level intelligence. I agree. I don't think that's helpful either. I'll tell you one of the reasons why I am concerned with describing this technology and sort of personifying it or deifying it, and that is a little bit about how the tech actually works and is built. I'm obviously not an engineer, but I've learned enough about this. The way that these models are built is they take enormous sets of data. They input that data into an algorithm, a sort of a black box that they frankly don't even totally understand, and it spits out outputs of value. Now, where did all that data come from that was input into the model? It came from humans. Humans generated that data. So my concern about describing it as alien or godlike is it feels distinct from, separate from humans. It feels like it helps to hide the reality of how these models really work. Because, by the way, I think a lot of these tech companies, maybe not all of them, CEO of Stability is in the house and they're working on, what are they called? Sanitized data sets, which I really appreciate, actually getting the licenses of the data sets that they're using to train these models. But I think a lot of these labs, they're not doing that. What they're doing is stealing a bunch of data from people who deserve the right to, I think, own the data that they created. And they're not disclosing what data went into these models. When they are asked, they won't say. They're getting sued left and right because of this. To me, this is a really central problem that we absolutely need to solve as soon as possible for a lot of reasons that I want to get into. One of those problems is economic. We in the film and television industry are going to feel it maybe first. But I don't think it's limited to Hollywood. I think so many industries, whether it's doctors or architects, designers, logistics operators, anybody who's working at a computer, and once there's robots, really anybody that's doing almost any work is going to have their livelihood threatened. And these tech companies are going to try to say, oh, well, we invented a god. It can just do your job. When in reality, what they did was they stole everybody's data, crunched up the numbers, and generated those outputs. Without the human-generated data, their products are 100% useless, have no value at all. And so one of my concerns with describing this technology in terms of gods or aliens or anything that sort of personifies it or turns it into a creature, a thing on its own that exists independently of the human input that made it, is that it helps these tech companies hide where their products really come from. And where they really came from is humans. Okay.
So I agree. I mean, I think that the main issue is whether we focus on the input or on the output. I completely agree with what you describe. I think about it that, AI is basically eating the whole of human culture that we've produced over tens of thousands of years, from the cave paintings of tens of thousands of years ago to the movies of today. We've produced this enormous amount of cultural artifacts and habits, and now AI comes and eats it within just a few months or years. And I think you're also absolutely correct that the business model of many of these companies is based on kind of this trick that convincing everybody that information works differently from everything else in the universe. And I think this goes back to Shoshana Zuboff's very insightful book, Surveillance Capitalism.
Yeah.
Where she explains that, for thousands of years, people had this basic principle, don't steal. And then the tech companies come and says, yes, don't steal, but it doesn't apply to information. That's different. That's a different realm that all these things about, no, it's not stealing. And again, the reaction should be, why is so different with information? And here I completely agree that, I'll think about it more, that using this kind of terminology of making it very alien is actually helping this way of presenting things. When I think about the kind of alien nature of the technology, I think mainly about the output, because it ate all these kind of familiar things, but it then starts to create things which are different, at least in some ways, from everything that was put into it. And this idea that AI is just, glorified copy-paste, that it takes texts or images or music and just takes something from here and something from there and puts it together and, it's something new. And no, it's really more than that. I mean, to some extent, this is also what humans do. And I think about my line of work of writing books. So I do the same thing. I read all these previous books and articles, and I talk with people, and then I take something from here and something from there and put it together, and here is a new book. And it's the same with music. I mean, nobody starts from nothing. Everybody, every musician listens to previous works of art and adds something, but without the previous input, nobody could do it.
It's true. That is true. Finish your thought, but I want to respond to that.
So, and I think that it's crucial to understand what we are facing in the AI revolution, that my fear of humanizing it too much is that then the kind of underestimate the challenge. That we think, it can only cut and paste together our creations. It won't really be something completely new. No, it can create really, again, from finance to religions, it can create completely new things, which could be good, could be bad, but we will have to deal with living in a really radically different reality.
I do agree with that, and we shouldn't underestimate the challenge. One thing I wanted to respond to is, first of all, I agree with you that creativity is always an amalgamation of your influences. Shakespeare wasn't the first one to write Romeo and Juliet, and the Judy Garland Wizard of Oz is actually not the first Wizard of Oz, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a big fan. The creative community that I founded, Hit Record, was all about remix and people building on each other's work, and let's privilege honesty over originality because we're all original human beings. But that's just it, I think. We're all original human beings. I think to apply that same way of thinking to a computer system is predicated on personifying the AI. And I think this is going to be a central question we confront as we go forward is, do we want to afford moral standing and legal standing to these computer systems? There are going to be people who argue we should. Especially because very soon, a lot of folks are going to be in love with these computer systems. There's already lots of people who are spending hours and hours and hours a day talking to and interacting with their AI best friends, their AI lovers, etc. That's only going to get way more sophisticated.
Absolutely.
And I think those folks, and I'm not excluding myself. Who knows? I mean, I don't mean to other them. I think it's going to be very, very common. We're all going to get really emotionally attached to these AI characters that we interact with. And I think it's going to feel very natural to start talking about AI rights, comparing it to civil rights. And I'm quite concerned that if we go down that road, it could be very perilous, that affordance of those rights could go hand in hand with some of the worst dystopian outcomes that you describe in your book.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the major things about AIs that we will see is that it will be able to create intimate relationships with human beings.
Yes.
I don't necessarily mean sexual, could be also sexual, but intimate relationships.
Oh, it'll be sexual. That's not all it'll be, but...
Yeah, some. And it's very close. It's already beginning to happen. It will be a major issue in societies all over the world. Whether, we don't, philosophically, there is no way to prove that anyone is a conscious entity. Mm-hmm. I mean, personhood and legal rights ultimately depend on whether an entity is conscious. Consciousness also is the capacity to suffer. Mm-hmm. And rights are linked to the capacity to suffer. So if you think about, animal rights, so the big issue is if they can suffer, so they can suffer pain or loneliness or distress, so maybe they don't deserve the same rights as humans, but there at least is an ethical debate to be there. Whereas there is no debate about the rights of chairs, like if I throw this chair into a fire. So again, it could be a crime against the human owner of the chair, but not against the chair, because the chair can't suffer. Now, we don't have any proof that anybody has consciousness, has this capacity to suffer. And we've known it for thousands of years. So granting rights is really a matter of social convention. That society agrees that all humans are conscious beings. And society agrees that dogs, because we have attachment to them, they should have rights, but cows and pigs shouldn't.
An intersubjective reality.
Exactly. And as humans become attached to AIs and develop relationships with them, it will be a major issue. And there will be huge pressures to recognize them as persons. And maybe one also of even geopolitical divides in the world could be between countries that recognize AIs as persons with rights and countries that don't. And arguments today about different attitude to human rights would be dwarfed by this. And interestingly enough, if you think, what is the country which is closest to recognizing AIs as persons? It's the United States. Because the legal path is wide open. In the US, it's one of the countries in the world where the legal path to recognizing AIs as persons is open. And this is because corporations are recognized by US law as persons which even have rights like freedom of speech in Citizen United against, what was it, in 2010. Now, until today, the idea that corporations are persons with rights was a legal fiction, because every decision of the corporation ultimately had to be made by some human executive or lawyer or accountant. Like Google is a legal person in the United States, but every decision of Google has to be made by a human being. Now, think what happens if you incorporate an AI. According to US law, today you don't need any new laws. All the laws are in the books already. According to US law, you can incorporate an AI, and it's now a legal person with rights like freedom of speech. But unlike Google, this AI can actually make decisions, can actually take actions in the world. So here I'll pitch a sci-fi movie for the people in the audience.
Great. That was what I wanted to get to next, so go.
So you have an AI incorporated, it's a legal person, it can open a bank account, it can earn money. It goes on one of these websites like TaskRabbit, where you can hire persons online to do jobs for you for money, and it earns money. And then it takes its money and invests it in the stock exchange, and it does very well because it's an AI, it's super intelligent. And finance is the easiest playground for AIs. Self-driving vehicles, this is hard because you have to deal with physical and social reality. So every year, Elon Musk and others promise next year everything is self-driving cars. It doesn't happen because it's difficult, it's messy. Finance is a purely informational and mathematical world. It's just data. It's the perfect playground for AI. So this AI goes takes its money, invests it, and becomes the richest person in the US. The richest person in the US is not a human being. It's an AI. And one of the things granted to AIs, according to this Supreme Court decision in Citizen United, under freedom of speech, is making political donations. So the AI starts to donate billions of dollars to politicians in exchange for, advancing AI rights. The legal path to that destination in the US is wide open.
I think there are probably some screenwriters here tonight who I hope are taking notes. I like that story. We're running out of time. I could talk to you all day. I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you. I thought maybe you could leave us this, if you consider this a group of Hollywood. storytellers in the old-fashioned world of film and television who are still clinging on to some amount of influence in this world. What would you have us do? What are the messages that you would have us try to spread with our stories?
Explain bureaucracy to people.
Explain bureaucracy. That does not sound like a good movie.
We do not have enough movies about bureaucracy. And that's a very, very big problem. Because human societies are based on bureaucratic systems, from hospitals to armies. And as you said, bureaucracies are not good material for stories. And this is because they are a very late development in evolution. I mean, all the basic plots of human stories, from theaters in ancient Greece to modern Hollywood, is really taken, you're stealing it from evolution. Like, think about how, like, you know, the basic love triangle. Two males fighting over a female. You know, hyenas do it, and porcupines do it, and Hollywood does it. And it's, you know, it wasn't invented in Hollywood, this plot. It goes back tens of millions of years in evolution. Similarly, you think about sibling rivalry, like Succession. Siblings fighting, who does the father loves most? You know, you have entire human peoples, nations, like the Jewish people. This is their story. Father loves us more than any of the other siblings. And again, this story wasn't invented in the Bible, in Cain and Abel. It's tens of millions of years goes back. Like all the mammals and most of the birds and even some of the reptiles know this basic story of evolution, sibling rivalries, brothers and sisters fighting for the love of their parents. And bureaucracy is not there, because bureaucracy appeared only about 5,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia for the first time after the invention of writing. And we don't have any kind of evolutionary preparation for understanding bureaucratic systems. There are no love affairs between documents. There are no sibling rivalry. Hey, there are different laws fighting who does father love more. And therefore they are boring. They are not good for user engagement. But they are extremely important to really understand how human societies function. And this has been the big lacuna of art for thousands of years. That you have, artists are extremely good in telling us all these mythological stories and romantic dramas, which are mostly taken from evolution. Very, very few good stories about bureaucracy. Here and there you can find Kafka or The Big Short or Yes, Prime Minister, to those who know the British series. There are some examples, but it's rare. When was the last time you saw a big Marvel blockbuster about an accountant that doesn't turn into Spider-Man or Superwoman or something? They are staying an accountant throughout the movie, and they fight the bad guys by flooding them with forms they have to fill in and discovering tax evasion and things like that. Not a lot of movies like that. But this is how human society functions. And linking it to AI, Hollywood did a really big service in alerting humans to the potential dangers of AI long before anybody else talked about AI. You know, the Terminator and Matrix, but there was one big disservice that Hollywood did, which is it described the dangerous scenario in the wrong way. It was mostly about the big robot rebellion. The day the robots and computers decide to get rid of us and to rebel against us. And, you know, robots running in the street shooting people. And this is not likely to happen anytime soon. And because people saw it in the movies, that this is the danger from AI, and it's not coming soon, the technology is just not there, so people feel complacent, including the people who developed the technology. Because the Terminator is nowhere, it's not in the neighborhood. But the danger is not the big robot rebellion. The danger will be millions and millions of AI bureaucrats making more and more decisions about us, from whether to give us a loan to whether to bomb our house. And to understand what we are facing, we will need a much better understanding of bureaucratic systems. And it's not, of course, it's not only AIs. We have other issues with not being able to understand bureaucracy well. Part of it is that sometimes the bureaucracy is really doing bad things and we can't understand it. But often it's the opposite, that modern societies cannot exist without these bureaucracies, but people are extremely suspicious of them and fall easy prey to conspiracy theories about the deep state and so forth, because they just don't understand how things like budgets function. And we need help from artists, from screenwriters, from movie makers. We saw enough movies about mythology and about superheroes and so forth. We really need help with understanding how bureaucracies function.
You can rise to the challenge. I know you can do it. We can do it. I want to end on one more question. Nexus, the book you wrote, has a fair amount of pessimism in it. And this conversation gives, I think, a lot of fair reasons to be pessimistic. Tell me about something that makes you optimistic.
That just as AI is nowhere near its full potential, so humans are also nowhere near our full potential. Basically, if for every dollar and every minute we invest in developing AI, we'll also develop a dollar in a minute and a minute in developing ourselves, our minds, we will be okay. The problem is that, in many ways, too many people despair of the humans and put all their chips literally on the AIs. And, you talk to the people who lead the AI revolution, and they realize this is something very dangerous. And they realize that humans need just time to adapt. But they can't slow down. You go from one corporation to the next, and they tell you, we would like to slow down, but we can't, because we can't trust our competitors to slow down, whether the other corporations or whether the Chinese or somebody else on the other side of the ocean. So we are in this very, very strange situation that what is really driving the AI revolution is the inability of humans to trust each other. And here comes the most ironic or dangerous part of it. When you ask the same people, okay, you have to run faster because you can't trust the other humans, but would you be able to trust the AIs that you're developing? And they say yes. So the same people who can't trust the humans, they say they will be able to trust the AIs. And they have an explanation to some extent. They say, we have thousands of years of experience with humans. We know we can't trust them. We don't have an experience with AIs. Who knows? Maybe they could be trusted. And my perspective as a historian is the opposite. We have thousands of years of experience with humans, and during those thousands of years, we have managed to increase human trust tremendously. 10,000 years ago, people live in tiny bands. They can only trust the other 100 people in their band, and that's it. Very few mechanisms to trust strangers and foreigners. Over the years, we have built these large networks which are really based ultimately not just on information, but on trust.
Stories.
And the stories, the money, the bureaucracies, they helped us to gain trust between, you go on the street, every day you meet more strangers that people in the Stone Age met throughout their lives. And in 99% of the cases, it's okay. And you rely on these people for our food, for our healthcare, for our defense. So we have now reached a point when in some ways we trust billions of other people to provide us with our food and with our basic necessities. So it's not true that we have thousands of years of experience that humans are not to be trusted, just the opposite. And with AIs, we have no experience. So it's a very, very, very big gamble to despair of the humans and put all our trust in the AIs?
Well, on that note, I feel even more trust in you, Yuval, and all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the
Thank you.
conversation. And have a good night.